Leading up to this Christmas season, I've had many members at CGC Academy come to the coaching calls wanting to learn this piece of music, In the Bleak Midwinter. It's a gorgeous song written by Christina Rossetti, a poet, and then set to music by different composers, including Gustav Holst, which is the setting we have here. And I thought it might be nice, leading up to this Christmas season, to offer a lesson on some things to look out for and some tips on how to approach this beautiful music. So let's get started. So when you get started with any piece of music, I think it's very important to look at some key items. The first would be, what's the key signature? What's the time signature? So here we have no sharps or flats, and the very first note is C. The note of the last chord is C, so it's a pretty good bet that we're dealing with C major. You also have some other things that are part of C major, like this G and this E. Those are both a part of C major. And we're in common time, or 4/4 time. So that means there are 4 quarter notes to every measure, right? Simple stuff, but it's good to just have an idea of what you're encountering in the music before you start. Just give a quick scan. And then you might also notice some things along the way that stand out. So for instance, we might notice an A flat that does not belong to C major. We might look at extended techniques. Oh, what is this thing right here at the end? XIX. That's a harmonic. We'll come back to that. Or some notes that might be played out of position. For instance, this music fits really well around grade 2, but if you're in grade 2, you might not be used to be playing in this position. That's in 5th position. And so you might say, okay, I'm going to have to spend more time here, or I might have to adjust the fingerings here. We're going to come to that in a moment as well. So just have a quick scan of the music and discover all the things that need work anytime you begin a new piece of music. What we notice with this music is we have an introduction in this first line. All of this is introductory material. And then look, it gets repeated at the end, almost exactly, just a little bit different with that harmonic at the end. But it's mirroring the introduction. And then between all of that, we have a verse. Just like if you were performing this with a choir, you'd have an organist that plays the introduction, and then the choir comes in and sings the verse. This particular verse has 2 sections. So I drew a line through the melody to tell you that's where the melody is, and we'll come back to how to identify that more clearly later. But if I were being really good, I might actually say, no, let's skip all of the, or sorry, let me back up just a little bit here. We would say, actually, this is the second part of the verse, and so it's kind of new material. And then when we come here, that is where we start the intro part of the verse again. So the intro part of the verse gets repeated at the end. So learning a piece of music, it's always good to have clarity on the form, the time signature, the key signature, the structure, so you really have a good idea of where things are going before you get started. So the next thing to do is to really identify your voices and to separate your voices. This particular music is typically sung in a choir setting where we have 4 voices and an organ. It's impossible to do on the guitar. So I've just simplified that to have a melody, which is what we have here, and then an accompaniment underneath it right here. Now, when you're looking at voices in classical guitar music, one way, pretty reliable but not entirely reliable, but one mostly reliable way to identify different voices is stem direction. So you'll notice the stems on all of these notes goes up like this, and the stems on all of these notes go down like this, right? So that's a pretty reliable way of finding out where your melody notes are. Look at the stem directions. In this piece, the melody always has a stem going up. The only places where you might not have a stem going up would be like here and here, where we have whole notes. Those notes don't have stems, but they are melody notes, and the way that we know they're melody notes is that below those we have rests underneath the notes, which is a way of saying the accompaniment is resting here, but the other note is not, and the other note is a melody, right? And so if we follow that rest into what comes next, we see down stems. So we know that those the rest is a part of the accompaniment, and the other note is melody. Okay? So when we're playing melody over against accompaniment, it's really important that the melody is clear, but also that it's not overshadowed by the accompaniment. If we were to play it like that, it sounds like this. It just becomes really messy, and it's hard to distinguish what's melody and what's accompaniment. Especially in certain places, it really gets confused, like, is that all melody? No. So the way that we separate those is to play the melody louder and the accompaniment softer. But I want to give you some caution here with how to approach loud melody versus soft accompaniment. Sometimes we really bang out the melody and it becomes harsh. Loud, in this case, is relative. It doesn't mean play it loudly. It means louder than the accompaniment. So we want to think the accompaniment really soft, like a whisper. And then the melody can be nice and relaxed, like this. That way I can still play the melody at a soft dynamic, but the accompaniment is so much softer that it's still not getting in the way of the melody. The melody can really shine and we can hear it very clearly. So you can adjust that. Meaning you can adjust how loud you play the overall dynamic or the distance that you want between those two by how much you dig into the melody notes versus the accompaniment. And what I mean by dig in is in the right hand, how much you press the string. If you press the string toward the sound hole, when you release the finger, you get a louder sound. Whereas if you just brush the finger across the string, you get a softer sound. So if we brush the accompaniment and then just dig in a little bit with our fingers to play the melody, then we get that effect. That becomes even more challenging when we have chords where we have to bring out a melody note, like here in measure 11, where we have a big stack of notes in chords. You'll notice that what I'm doing is I'm really pushing with my A finger, but my P and my P and M are playing nice and softly. And you hear the D come out very clearly without the P and the M being like this, where everything's loud. Instead, open strings are more difficult to control, which means you might have to play open strings even quieter, brush even more, or less, I guess is the way to put that, on open strings, because they can really jump out. So you have to be careful not to play those too loudly. Instead, just brushing those really nice and gently and pushing in with the finger on the upper note. So it will take more time when you're working with those chords in measure 11 or again in measure 19. To really make the melody come out and allow the chords to be quieter. That may be the most important thing that I'd like you to learn, to walk away from when you go to learn this music, is to really spend some time crafting the separation of voices. And a good way to do that is just to sing. So if you're familiar with this music and you sing it often, then that's great. But if you aren't familiar with singing or it's not something that you like to do, I still think it's a good practice to sing the melody. Dum ba dum bum bum bum. Or you could sing the words. I think singing the words is actually a great idea because it helps to give a sense of the cadence of how the words are pronounced, and that helps us phrase. We're going to come to that in a moment. But for now, just singing the melody by itself can give a really good idea of how to connect the notes together. And when they're not, when you can really notice when notes are not connected in a legato way after singing. You can hear all the breath that goes behind every note and how those notes connect. We typically don't sing things like da, 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 da. It's harder to do that. It takes more breath. But this, da, 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 keeping our breath moving through each and every note is much easier to do, and it sounds better. The same thing is true on the guitar, but it's much harder to do. We don't have breath. We have to rely on our fingers. And every time we pluck a new note, there's a little cutoff between the previous note and the next note. So we really have to be diligent with keeping the fingers down on the left hand for long enough. Get my hand in. So my one finger, when it goes down here, I can leave it down on the string before I play the 4 on the G. And that really helps to create more legato in the melody line, which is so important for vocal music. So as you're learning the music, you really want to pay attention to places when you're lifting, especially when you have other notes involved in the accompaniment. Like, sounds very bouncy instead of, or letting this G ring instead of, you hear that? When you sing it, da 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 da, we don't do that. Instead we sing it da 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 da. So that's how we want to play it. Now, the next part that I want to really draw your attention to is the relationship between notes. So we have understood the voices. The melody should come out more than the accompaniment. The melody should be nice and connected without detaching the notes and making them legato by lifting fingers too much in the left hand. But some notes should be louder than other notes in the melody because of their relationship. So right here, we have a D that resolves to C. Now underneath it, we have these notes. And if you've done any music theory at all, you might notice those notes A, E, A, and especially this one, C, make up the notes of the chord A minor. D, however, is not a part of A minor. So in this case, we would call this a non-chordal tone. It's very much like a suspended chord. It's an A suspended that resolves to A minor. But you don't have to even know the chord or any of that. Just understand the feeling of this. It feels like it wants to go somewhere. And that feels right when we get there. And so that relationship should be one of weight, of tension, that resolves and relieves that tension. So heavy and soft. Loud and soft is a great way of thinking of the relationships of tension and release. But again, we have to be careful about accent, so you don't want to go like really loud. It's just louder than the next note. It's a relationship. So again, it's relative loud. So again, here I mentioned that a rest stroke might be a good way of bringing out that note. And then a really nice light brushing on the C to indicate that it's a resolution. But if you play this nice and quietly, the other notes need to be even quieter. So don't go and play those louder, because it's still a melody note even though it's quiet. So everything below it needs to be even quieter. So that's a really good place where we have a relationship of weight resolving. The other place where we have that very clearly is right at the beginning. I haven't touched on the beginning yet, have I? But we have this D resolving to C. Now, technically there are down stems on the C's, and I probably should have made those up stems. Sorry about that. But in any case, what we have is very similar to what we just looked at with that A minor chord, where we have resolutions, or suspension kind of chords, suspended chords, resolving downward. So the D does not belong. This is a C major chord. C, G, and E are the notes of C major, C, E, and G. And D is the second. It doesn't belong to the chord, which means we're going to give a little bit more weight to the non-chordal tone, the one that doesn't belong, to really draw attention to its out-of-placeness and then resolve it softly. So loud, soft, weight, and I'm not sure what the opposite of weight is. Weight and lightness, or tension and release, all of those kinds of things. Those are the ways that you want to think about. But we're playing this D with an E, and it's really easy on open strings to go and make the E loud, harsh, not a great sound. So in this case, again, you want to use your middle finger on the D to push into the string a bit more, and don't push in with the A finger. So even if I play it pretty loud, the D comes out louder than the E. Instead of this, where the E is equal, or even sometimes louder because of how harsh it is. So really take care of making the E quiet. We still want to hear it, but quieter than the D. And then the C should be the quietest of all. Here we can make them equal, and then... And speaking of things that are out of place, I think it's nice to draw attention to notes that don't belong. And in this case, we have an A flat. So you can really draw more attention again by digging in with your I finger on that A flat at the end of the measure right here, to really make it clear that that's different than what we were expecting. We were expecting this again. But instead, you could even go make a different color if you'd like, or to really draw attention to its uniqueness. Okay, so that's another really important element, is to notice the relationships between notes, especially where we have notes that fall away from being louder to softer. So another place would be here in measure 18. It repeats what we saw in measure 6 with this D. So the D and the B should be louder than the C. Or the D on top, actually, is what should be louder. Okay? And then the C. The C is a resolution. A couple other things I want to touch on. The left hand. So there's a lot of interesting left hand movement in this piece. One spot that can be really tricky is in measure 8, where we have this 1 on the F kind of moves out of its usual second position into folding over onto the 3rd fret. So we really want this D to be louder than everything else. So make sure that, again, the accompaniment is really nice and quiet. And including this F. Don't hit it hard. It's not this. I mean, it's a G7 chord resolving to C, but we don't want it to be super loud because it gets in the way of the melody note. So just fold that one over. You can even see how my elbow sort of moves back toward the headstock slightly to get my one finger in position. Don't use your wrist like this. Instead, use the elbow, and that allows the one to just fold across like that. Another spot that's pretty tricky for the left hand is the chords, like I was talking about earlier, measure 11. In this case, we have, in the previous measure, we have a, sorry, let me make this just a little thinner. So here we have a 3. Hopefully you can see that. That's a 3 on that A. And so our 3 is already on the string it's going to be on here. It's already there on the A. So we can leave that. It's called a guide finger. When we use the same finger from one chord into the next one. So the 1 and the 4 is really all that moves. Technically, yes, you're lifting the 2 off of the string, but the 1 moves from the 2nd string to the 6th string, and then you need the 4 on the D on the 2nd string. But the 3 can just stay in place. And that really simplifies the motion. Think about what's common from one chord to the next when you're working on chord transitions and what needs to change. In this case, it's just the 1 has to lift from the C down to the F, and then the 4 has to place itself on the D. And the same thing for the next chord, where we have 4, open, open, 2. All that we need to do is leave the 4 down. Again, that's a guide finger. It stays on the string. The 2 is free, so we can have it hovering over the B. So when we play this F chord, it's a D minor in first inversion, but when we play this chord, the 2 can be ready over the B, so that all we have to do is place it down and then lift the 3, and we're good to go. So another thing I want to touch on here is in the melody. When we're dealing with these big block chords, we have D, E, D. It's really important that we don't hold this D, even though it is a guide finger. I think it's important to lift instead of this, where we get those melody notes ringing over one another. It's easier to play if we leave the 4 down, but it sounds better as a melody if we lift the 4. So that it's really clear that the melody is actually not sort of D and E together, but we transition from D to E back down to D. Okay? When we have the chords in measure 19, we have fewer guide fingers. This is more difficult. We have a guide finger on the 2, so that's a common one, right? That's a common note that gets held across. And that's it. So we really have to be moving more fingers in this case, and including the 3, which is here. We don't have that as a guide finger. So one thing you could do in this section, actually, is to play a 2 on this note. So then you do have a guide finger. That's one way to do it. It's not necessary, but if you find that to be easier, then go for it. Now in measure 13, we have what's called campanella, where we leave fretted notes down and blend those notes with open strings. It creates this really bell-like texture because campanella means bells. It's really quite beautiful, especially if you add a little vibrato to the fretted notes. But you don't have to play it in this position. So if you are in grade 2 and you find it easier to play these in first position, you can play it like this. It's totally fine to do that if that's easier to do. However, if you're a higher grade player or if you're up for a challenge, what I'm asking you to do here is to leave these notes fretted, move up, and then again move up one more fret. And then here, or you could go all the way down. You could also play the E open. So you have a few options here. You can go play a bar chord. You can go P, I, M, and then A on that open string, or it's a big jump to go all the way back to first position, so I like it better here in fifth position. And then back to first position for measure 15. Whichever you like there, it's completely up to you. But I do think it adds something nice with the campanella there in measure 13. Now at the very end, I've asked you to play a harmonic on the 19th fret of the first string. This is the first string. So if you're not used to playing harmonics, this will feel a little weird at first, but it should just be right there, an artificial harmonic on the 19th fret. Now another way you could do it is to move and play the harmonic, or play it here on the 7th fret because it's the same. Like that. It's the same note, same pitch. Or if you're really up for a challenge, you could play it up here with this. And that allows all of the notes to ring, including that high B. But for now, I think the easier way to do it is just here on the 19th fret with an artificial harmonic. So if you're not used to that, then just let that chord ring. It's totally fine if artificial harmonics are not something that you've done yet, to just let that note ring. So I hope this has been an enjoyable lesson on how to approach in the Bleak Midwinter. And yeah, I'll see you around next time.